Hello, this is Dr. Gilbert Castleberry, Associate Professor and Program Director of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. And I am here as part of our Creating Social Media Presence and Cultural Movements Strategic Interviewing Series. And in this course, we are working on professional development for our students and highlighting the value of not just communication, but digital communication in the social media age. And part of our goal is to bring in guest interviewees each week to help us not only learn about the dexterity of degrees coming out of the humanities, whether it's communication or marketing, public relations, advertising, and so on. So many interconnected types of positions and roles that are available to us today. Essential to that is understanding many of these roles overlap with one another. And so we look at bringing in guests that can speak to that type of expertise and share some of their stories, but more importantly, they're here to answer your questions. And so we ask students to be able to produce those questions in advance and provide them in an asynchronous manner so that we're able to meet all those educational needs. Students will be able to view the interview now or in a future date, ideally, and then report on those findings for an assignment much later down the road. Today, I'm joined by a colleague of sorts, all right, someone with, as we've previewed, experience in advertising, in the public relations world, experiences with videography, but coming from an area of expertise in graphic design. And he serves as the chair of the School of Art and Graphic Design, and probably something slightly different sounding than that, but
close enough.
You can kind of let us know as we get started here. Cory Fuller, thanks for taking some time out of your quarantine schedule to join us as we're crawling our way back out of the COVID-19 primordial ooze and trying to restart the economy, restart some sort of lifestyle that allows us to keep the lights on or anything like that. An exciting conversation we're anticipating to unfold, and thank you for being the centerpiece of that this experience in week one.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
As we get things going, and I hope to have this be essentially a student-driven discussion today. Do you want to give us a little bit of a chronological background? Tell us a little bit how you worked through particular roles to get to the place where you're at today.
Right, thanks. So I've always had an interest in visual art and design, although I may not have had those words to apply to it, but I've always been a very visual person. I received an undergraduate degree in graphic design from Southwestern Oklahoma State University in Weatherford, which is where I met Garrett. And then after that, I proceeded on to graduate school at the University of Central Oklahoma, where I pursued an MFA, which is a Master of Fine Arts in Design. And as I was doing that, I was also working at Legacy Bank, where I got a chance to really work professionally as a graphic designer and do a lot of different campaigns. I worked on their website, so various brochures, also training videos, even some TV commercials. And so I was sort of doing professional work in grad school at the same time. I ended up kind of fast tracking my degree at the end and quit at the bank so I could focus on my studies. And I did a thesis in church branding and marketing, essentially, which was kind of at a lot of different intersections for me in my life. And after my graduate experience, I really fell in love with teaching. And so I proceeded to go to Oklahoma Baptist University, where I've been now for 11 years teaching graphic design. And Garrett's right, I now chair the Division of Art and Design here at OBU.
It's close.
Close enough.
In a way. Art and graphic design. Did I say that right that time?
Well, it's just art and design, but the degree is graphic design. So it could be.
I did it again.
It could be either way.
Art and design. Um, um, but love the dexterity of your experience here, and the students really piggybacked on top of that. I think one of the benefits of this course is it satisfies several different degree needs. We have a tradition of it, of having these guests in our communication media and ethics major, but we're very lucky to have a lot of crossover with our digital marketing students. And I think a bulk of our questions do come from that direction. So your experiences really will speak to their present needs. But not only their present needs, they have interests in your past. So I want to jump over to student questions. And let me start with, from remembering correctly, some of the questions that dealt with early career experiences. So let's lead off with a question from Haley as we get started.
Hi, Mr. Fuller. My name is Haley Helton, and I'm a junior at Mid-America Christian University this year. My first question for you is, what are some of the pros and cons of working for a large company such as Legacy Bank?
All right. Tell us about some of the pros and cons working at a corporate bank setting.
So, yeah, that's a really good question. I think particularly in this climate, as you all are escaping from school, that's probably not the right way to say it. As you're graduating from school, you'll be looking for hopefully stable employment. And I think there's always the pull to the small studios, small marketing agencies that maybe have a particular niche. But there sometimes can be some more stability in a larger firm. So many of my students that graduate from my program will go to work for maybe a church or an ad agency or a small design firm, or they may work as what we would call an in-house designer, meaning they would work for a company like in the energy sector or financial sector, and they would do graphic design or marketing or PR, but sort of for a particular company. And so the company would do that stuff in-house as opposed to outsourcing that all to a company that specializes in that. Well, one of the benefits to working for a company like Legacy is you're not hopefully as subject to some of the whims of the market. So like, let's say you go to work for an ad agency. I could use some specifics in Oklahoma City, but I'll probably steer clear of that. It's a little too close to home probably for some people. So, but let's say you're the biggest ad agency in Oklahoma City and you have one primary client and that client drops you, or that relationship sours. That entire firm, because they put all their eggs in one basket of that one big client, that whole firm is now at risk. And I've seen that happen several times to big firms in Oklahoma City that have put too many eggs in the basket of one particular client. That client jumps ship for whatever reason, and then they do a mass layoff. So now, of course, the question is, which company do you get with? So hopefully banking is going to be stable. Energy is pretty rough right now. But I think the idea with a big company is you have a little bit more insulation. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, Haley's question. Let me grab a follow-up from her here.
My second question for you is, we know you have several Addy Awards. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what you were awarded for? Thanks.
All right, so tie this into some of your experience with the Addies in at our greater metropolitan area.
Right, so the Addy Awards are put on by the Oklahoma City Advertising Federation. And so there's an American Advertising Federation, and so that's obviously the national entity. And then Oklahoma City has its own version, its own chapter of an ad club. And so they put on the Addies locally. And it's a really good chance to get to meet and network with other designers. Of course, in my current context at OBU, I'm mainly interested in getting my students to try to win awards to the Addies. But when I was working as a professional, that's one of the things we try to do, is always submit entries. And I will tell you from experience, you don't always win. But it makes it a lot sweeter when you do. So some of the pieces that we won for were things I did at Legacy Bank. Part of it was in interior design, as odd as that would maybe sound, but we did some things for a bank that we were opening. We wanted 3 different teller stations to sort of represent the past, the present, and the future of banking. And then we had this large mural that kind of went behind all of those teller stations. So I designed that whole mural that kind of told the story of the bank, and it was, probably 20 feet wide by 6 feet high, and it was installed, just like wallpaper, and we had it printed and installed. And so that was kind of a unique piece to get to work on, that won an Addy Award. And we've won other awards for smaller collateral pieces, brochures and different campaigns that we had worked on. So yeah, thanks for that question. I would encourage you to submit some pieces, and it really is a good resume item if you're able to win and attend the gala. It's a good networking opportunity.
Now, I want to piggyback off of this a little bit to draw comparison. You attended as a graphic designer, as someone kind of working corporately, but you have maintained some ties over time. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, you help connect students with the Addies possibly each year. And what is that process like, and how are you getting them involved, right? What kind of role do those students play as you're trying to connect them through that world?
Right. So, I mean, of course, I can't do the work for them. It's got to be student work, and there's a professional category and there's a student category. And actually in Oklahoma City, you would be astounded at how good the work is in the student category. I mean, sometimes I feel like the student category is actually better than some of the professional work that's coming out of Oklahoma City. So of course you have OU, OSU, UCO is a huge player in graphic design in the metro area. And so, OBU is a smaller school, but we're competing with these larger schools. And so I always work with students to try to, maybe select one or two of their best pieces and submit those. And there are so many different categories. So if you're interested in, voice work like radio or television or graphic design or sort of a multifaceted campaign or interactive design, they've got a category for almost everything.
And remind us, what time of year does this typically, is the gala organized, and what window of the year should students be looking out for those types of submission deadlines?
So always look for the first of the year for the Addies. And so usually right after, January 1st, they'll have a submission date. You submit online first. And then if you're submitting physical entries, like we actually drive our package design work or our brochures over to Oklahoma City, there's a second date for physical submissions. And then usually the gala is about a month later, usually in February.
Yep. Talking about this professional organization got me thinking about experiences with higher education and how some of the conference award circuits work within different disciplines. And something I've noticed over the years is that conference awards might have like a window of time, sort of, if it's a young teaching award, or if it's maybe a dissertation or book award, that there's almost sometimes a 2, maybe 3-year window of eligibility, simply because of that nature of when these deadlines tend to overlap or whatever. Is the Addies strictly a kind of fiscal year or calendar year deadline, or do you know how that works?
Yeah, so the work has to be submitted within a particular calendar year. So when you're doing work, like let's say for 2019, you're actually submitting those pieces just into 2020. But throughout the year, I would be trying to look at your body of work and say, let's see which of these pieces are the strongest, and kind of narrow those down and then submit your strongest pieces.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Let me queue up next student we want to hear from. Let me jump over to Aaliyah. All right. Aaliyah's question came in just under the radar here at the end. So I'll allow her to kind of cut in front of some others, and we'll hear what she has to say.
Hello, my name is Aaliyah Watts, and I'm a senior here at Mid-America Christian University. My first question is, what do you feel is essential to a prosperous company? And my second question is, how do you come up with new graphic designs that are not repetitive in the industry?
Okay. Did you catch the first half?
Yeah. Was it about what are some things that are essential? Like essentials?
It is, what do you feel is essential to a prosperous company?
Okay. Yeah. So essential to a prosperous company. Well, I think right now we're all looking at cash flow. So that's we could talk about mission and values and,
All the money.
paradigms and things, but yeah, it's all about the money right now. So I'll tell a story on a friend real quick, and he probably won't ever hear this, and I'm not betraying anything here, but so this friend of mine, he's always been an entrepreneur, just a brilliant guy, has a pretty diversified portfolio of different properties and ways of bringing in money. But one of his primary businesses is he owns an inflatables company. So he like blows up bounce houses for kids' birthday parties and does things for the youth jamboree and these sorts of things. Well, his business has completely tanked. So, I mean, when the Thunder canceled that game, that was like the line in the stand in Oklahoma, everything plummeted. So I think right now everyone is looking at their business model and saying, in what ways are we vulnerable? So there are businesses that are built entirely upon how social human beings are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if you're in a party planning business or event planning, I honestly don't know how you recover. I suppose if you have enough reserves, then you'll weather the storm and you'll come back and you'll rely on the government to kind of bail you out. But I think everybody is examining right now, what does it mean, excuse me, to be a prosperous company? I think everyone is in survival mode right now. I mean, I would encourage you guys as students to be as diverse as you can. I think you get to a point sometimes where you're such a specialist and you're so honed in on a particular skill. Well, what if that skill gets outsourced or becomes obsolete because of a new technology? You're in a real tough spot. So be as diverse as you can, be a problem solver and a critical thinker, and you'll be well served, I think, for the next 10 to 20 years, I hope.
You make an excellent point, and that may even anticipate a question, if I'm not mistaken, from Rebecca or one of the other classmates about diversification, but versus specialization. But I think that's an opportune moment for us to always remember the traditional value of a humanities degree, and it's, there are these urban, legends, these social myths about the humanities degree being, kind of quote unquote worthless, not worth, the price of printing the paper, right? But it could be a poorly managed, just, situation, right? It comes down to what kinds of values is it instilling, and ideally the tenets of a liberal arts education, to which I would, plant so many of the humanities within, is that it's giving you the opportunity to gain a broad skill set so that you can transplant them from opportunity to opportunity, that you're never limited. But it may require that you on occasion have to reinvent yourself. And doesn't that fit the larger ideology of the American dream, right? This idea that sometimes we do have to reinvent ourselves or restart a career in some way to move further with it.
Yes. Yeah. Good point.
And
then our next question was, I think, how do we avoid being repetitive in graphic design?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, she's hitting the nail on the head of the challenge of graphic design. And so, it's been said there's nothing new under the sun. That's true. So in graphic design, you're always just kind of trying to find new ways to be creative. And, there are countless fonts and countless color schemes. And so from a visual perspective, like you can continue to vary things. However, I think the real ability of a designer is not in learning how to use software. It's the creative problem solving. And so the agencies and the firms that are doing good work, relevant work, are those that can be the most creative. So that's the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, let's back up a little bit. Maybe in your story, your history of experiences. We've been reaching back. Let's go back even further. I found Rebecca's questions, and she asks something that I think relates to some of your earliest work, a parallel to graphic design.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Cummins, and I'm a senior here at Mid-America Christian University. My first question is, what sparked your interest in videography?
All right, so you also have experience in videography. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So Yeah, I mean, it's probably from watching too much television as a kid. That's probably where it stems from.
Sure.
Watched a lot of PBS, Sesame Street, Mister Rogers, all that. So yeah, I mean, I remember my dad always carrying around, one of those big VHS cassette recorders that he would carry around on his shoulder. And I guess I was an early adopter in college. Began doing video editing digitally, and Garrett and I had the opportunity to collaborate on several projects. Some just for fun, some for a ministry we were affiliated with, and then some for work for Legacy Bank, actually. I think again, it's that connection to the visual side of things, and even though I've gravitated more towards graphic design, when I get to sit down and do video editing, I enjoy it and I kind of miss it. So I did a lot of work at the bank in Final Cut Pro, and then I had a chance to teach at another university for a brief time and taught Adobe Premiere. And that was one of those situations like we need a body in a classroom. So I said I can do it, So I learned Premiere, and it was very similar to Final Cut. And just last month, I made a TV commercial for a guy. Well, it was actually not a TV commercial. It was something we released on social media, and it was going to play at a conference that he was a sponsor for. And it was super low tech. I mean, we were in era of social distancing.
Yes.
So I shot it on my iPhone. He did the narration. He sent it to me. I edited it all together in Adobe Premiere. I even played a little music for the soundtrack. I mean, it was the lowest imaginable budget project. But it's had like 6,000 views on Facebook, which is
Wow.
just stupid,
Oh,
Of course,
wow.
they may only be watching that for 3 seconds
Uh-huh.
to get this kind of views. But I think, again, you have to be nimble. And that's something that I can diversify with. If the graphic design thing doesn't work out for me, I've got the video editing thing to fall back on. So,
Well, and having worked in videography in spurts early in my career, I I would add, you have to be nimble and quick to succeed in that.
yeah.
To get over that candlestick, kind of get that paycheck there. Let's let me get back to Rebecca, and I think she helps move us forward in your chronology here.
Now, my second question is, could you describe a marketing technique that Legacy Bank uses that allows them to stand out from the crowd?
Right, that's a good question. So, I mean, when you look at how things are being sold, a lot of companies are using humor. They're using sex, sex appeal. They're using cognitive dissonance. If you love this person, you'll buy them this diamond ring. A lot of times they're guilting you. A lot of times they're playing on a sense of urgency and fear, even. And then a lot of brands, I think, are trying to do a higher level, a more transcendent kind of marketing, which would be more like storytelling. So what Legacy, I think, has tried to do, and how they've diversified themselves, would be that they've tried to tell their story well. So Legacy is a family-owned and operated bank. In over 100 years, they've only had 3 CEOs. So the first CEO was a pioneer that came here from Kansas, started the bank. He sold it to Mr. Carmack in 1954. Mr. Carmack's son inherited it around the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and Steve Carmack is still running the bank today. So banks are typically just merged and acquired and merged and sold and rebranded here and there. Legacy Bank is truly a family operation. And, some people may not care about that. They just care about an interest rate or a money market or whatever. But I think a lot of people are skeptical of the banking industry, and they feel like these are the bad guys just charging them interest, and they'll repossess their home or their car if they feel like it. And so banking is, they're not always seen as the good guys. But I think what Legacy has tried to do is sort of carve out a story to say, hey, we're connected to our communities. We're connected to families. We are a family-owned and operated bank. We succeed when you succeed. These kinds of ideas. Now, they're still subject to economic realities. And as people begin to default on loans in these coming days and months and years, they may be struggling. I don't know. But I think they've been conservative enough in some ways that they'll weather this storm. And I think that's the story they continue to tell is really about being family oriented. Their logo is a leaf, a post oak leaf with an acorn, and their watchword is simple beginnings, strong tomorrows. And so it's kind of this idea of this acorn growing in infancy to maturity to this full tree where you get this leaf. And anyway, that's probably more than you wanted to know about legacy, but that's what I see as their strength.
Oh, absolutely. Let me go ahead and play this next student question, and then we'll kind of we'll do some topic hopping, if you will. All right, so here you go.
Good day, my name is Neri Oshijafo, and I'm a senior at MACU. And my first question is, do you do what you love or you love what you do? And
okay, so that one could throw us off a little bit, so I'll pause in between here.
Okay.
Do you do what you love, or do you love what you do?
Right. That's a good question. Is that a chicken and egg kind of paradox?
Well, man,
So,
you know what it makes me think of, though, is we've had conversations already in this class, early in the class, about passion and whether or not you can fake your passion for something, right? For some role or some job, especially. You know, we're putting it in that kind of context, and I sense a connection between that here. But let me replay the phrasing again in case you've lost it.
And my first question is, do you do what you love or you love what you do?
right.
Do what you love, or do you love what you do?
So I think the way I would try to answer that question is just to say, I do love my job. I think sometimes people get a job so they can kind of enjoy their weekend, but then they've got to go back to that 9 to 5. I've always loved graphic design, and I love teaching. And so I guess I get to do both of those things. I think the fear, though, is if you're a creative, if you begin to tie your career to what you love to do, there's a risk that you could burn yourself out. There's a guy named Austin Kleon. He's from Austin, Texas. His last name is Kleon. And he's written several really nice little books, and they're not just for designers. They're great for artists and designers. But he has a lot of really good things to say about the work-life balance, especially if you're in a creative field. So he has a book called Still Like an Artist that I would really recommend to almost anyone. And so if you need something for your Christmas list or whatever. But, you know, if somebody becomes good at something, like let's say someone makes you a gift, the first thing you always say is, oh, you should go into this business. Like if they make you a cake, oh, you should turn that into a business. And there's always this risk to like try to monetize the things that we enjoy. So, I mean, there are days where I think I should be mowing lawns, you know, and painting at night because I'm tired of sort of prostituting, for lack of a better term, my creativity to try to please clients.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so if you're one of those people that kind of worries about contaminating your creativity, I mean, I would encourage you find sort of a normal, you know, day job and do your creative thing at night. If you feel like you can do your creativity and do your passion and get money for it, do that. But just know that there probably are some risks with that. So.
You remind me of, you know, an instinct that young people often have going into early career work, and that is that every idea they have that they perceive as a good idea, if not a great idea, has to be protected at all costs, right? It's almost the application of what in film theory we refer to as auteurism, the auteur theory, right? The idea that you have to have master control over your idea, and to relinquish that somehow kind of contaminates it, right? When in fact, you know, especially in advertising and marketing, you know, these are collaborative mediums, and
very much, yeah.
and other people own an even greater stake in the idea than you ever could, because they in fact own the company, the organization, and their stakes are literally higher than yours. And so I think the earlier students can learn how to appreciate and buy into the creative compromise, the more successful, maybe effective they can be in creating messages.
Right. Yeah.
let's hear the other question from Yuri here.
My second question is, would you ever stop creating journals? Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Did he ask if I would ever stop creating journals?
Yes, I think so.
Did you feed him that question, Garrett?
No. In fact, I don't believe that was. I don't remember approving that question. So it's a great. So it was a nice curveball, and I totally forgot that I read it earlier as well.
Yeah. Well, just so the listeners have some context, I did start an academic journal of sorts, really more of an outlet for creativity. And Garrett was so kind to help out with several issues, and particularly helped with our last issue, which, I'm saying last issue. So we ended the project after 8 issues. And anyway, it kind of goes back to his earlier question about, creativity and sort of the connection to vocation and making money. And sometimes the things you love the most are the things that, it's maybe not the right time or the right place to be working on a pet project. So I think sometimes we get to a place when we say, okay, that project has run its course or it's fulfilled its purpose. And so you don't always see it as a failure, it's just something that you're not going to do anymore. And that's kind of the way I feel about the journal. I loved every minute of it when we were doing it. But because of other work responsibilities, I had to pull the plug on it. So, well,
and, I think we're now more than ever in this digital age, look at television, for example, and sort of what's referred to as the streaming wars, in this era of what's called peak TV, right? Where artistic creativity and collaborative exercise and the amount of capital investment is at an all-time high across all these fronts. And you're seeing all of these decades-old properties, these intellectual properties, these TV properties getting resurrected, or to use the industry term, they're revived. These TV revivals are occurring, and they're successful. They're revisiting these old shows, and they're tapping into nostalgia. But the artistry's balanced enough that it's not a cynical cash grab. That there's an intent behind that message, and I'm going to carry that through here and not get lost to say. I think, when you come across a great idea and you're able to execute it well, or even end on your own terms, and there's a satisfaction that comes with that, we're just at a perfect time where it can be revisited. It can be continued later. Look at today's May 4th, right? Well, students may be watching it at a later date, but I'll go ahead and cement today's date. It's May 4th. May the 4th be with you. It's Star Wars Day, which, like so many other holidays in the U.S., and don't get me started on that, and I'm lowering my voice so I don't get in trouble here, are these purely corporatized, commodified holidays, phony baloney. And but so May 4th is now Star Wars Day. Star Wars is this long-running commodity, and now that it's under the acquisition of Disney, we can understand it as a never-ending property now. And there's no conclusion, quote unquote. But one of the things that did conclude in the recent past was their cartoon series, The Clone Wars. In fact, it was canceled, right? Or it was basically creatively abandoned, and it kind of went away. And it was all happening right at the eve of that merger many years ago. But here, what did they do? They revived the property, and they've been, to do what? To sell their streaming service, Disney Plus. And they're dropping the episodes just like a normal TV series, one a week. And guess what? The countdown was to today, the May the 4th day, of course. And so this taps into what we refer to as synergy, in the business world, but also it's symptomatic. It displays that these creative ideas, just because something's quote canceled like it used to be on TV, it doesn't have the same permanence anymore. And so I'm not trying to answer your question for you. I feel like now I realize I've hijacked it. It's great, especially when it's a creative project. It's great to, set things down for a time, and you don't have to feel like it's a permanent closure. there could be opportunity down the line. Or the silver lining I would interpret is now it opens up new creative space for you, right? New creative fulfillment that you can take on, a different kind of project or projects.
Right. Yep.
Let me switch over here. I think I had a question queued up. Too many tabs open. A little tab happy this week. I'll go ahead and let it play.
Hello, Mr. Fuller. Thank you for your time today. My name is Jie, and I have two questions for you. The first one is, what kind of job experience that you got from your previous job can apply to your current job?
Okay.
Talk to us about how your previous professional experiences help create the door for where you're at now.
Right. So, yeah, I think when I walk into a classroom and I can say that I've worked as a professional, as a designer in the marketplace, it gives me a little bit more credibility. Now, I'm not trying to diminish professors that don't have professional experience. There are people that go from undergraduate to graduate school, to get their master's and their PhD, and they are certainly subject matter experts. I think for a field like graphic design, it's particularly important to have worked in the field. And so my legacy bank experience was incredibly valuable. Like what Garrett was talking about earlier with collaboration, it's so critical. So, I mean, I can have an artistic vision that I bring to a project, and I'm bringing my creativity, but ultimately, if the CEO is not on board or the board of directors are not on board, or we feel like the market would react negatively, well, that project gets scrapped, or it gets sort of reappropriated or something. And so you really need that kind of experience to balance you out. And I've also been doing a lot of freelance work. I did that even starting out in college. I'm working on a couple of freelance projects now, and I can take those things into my classroom and say, hey, here's what I'm working on right now. And the interesting thing, I think my students sort of appreciate that I tend to be a little bit vulnerable in class, and I will show them logos I'm working on. I'll let them critique me. And it's kind of like I'm flipping the tables around because I'm constantly, just like, fix this font, fix this kerning, fix this color scheme, and they get a chance in a sort of a safe space to critique my work. And I think that's been really helpful for all of us. So yeah, I would not ever diminish any work experience that you've had. Sometimes when you work in a place you're not crazy about, it's finding out the culture you don't want to be in. And so you can continue to kind of leverage that into a new role. I would encourage all of you to get an internship if you can. And even if that goes poorly, just remember it's at one place. Try another place before you decide this is not the career path for me. It could be you're a victim of a bad corporate culture or something. So,
agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment.
The next one is, I know that Oklahoma Baptist University is a university with a Christian background. Do you share your faith with your students, and how do you connect your faith with graphic design? Thank you.
Right. So yeah, OBU is a distinctively Christian university, as we like to say. So we're a Christian liberal arts university. All of our faculty are confessing Christians. We're mostly members of evangelical churches. We have people that are members of mainline churches as well. So I mean, there are definitely some particularities to our faculty. Even with that, though, I mean, we have a pretty high diversity in our faculty as far as religious understandings and open-mindedness and political leanings. So as far as faith in the classroom, I mean, my students are very aware that I'm a believer, and I think the way that impacts them is if I'm coming down kind of hard on their work, they don't take it too personally. They know that I'm really there to help them, to come alongside them. I'm there to help make them better and ask the hard questions. I think there's probably a negative stereotype about Christian schools that we're just like church camps. We're here to just encourage everyone and move everyone along. This is a pretty critical, rigorous environment. And so part of what I'm doing as a Christian is saying, hey, if you're a professing Christian, you better take your work seriously because that's your testimony. And so, you know, when I think about Jesus, he probably had, you know, a vocation. I mean, he was probably trained as a carpenter. Paul talks about being a tent maker. And so I'm not trying to train preachers, and we do that here at OBU. I'm trying to train graphic designers that will go out into the world and be a positive witness for Christ. And if their work is shoddy, then that's a terrible testimony. And so I'm trying to let them know they've got to be excellent in all capacities, and then they might get a chance to share their faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you make an excellent point about you know, being part of the solution as a working professional and not part of the problem, right? Whether it's bringing maybe too much cynicism to the workforce, or really learning how to self-actualize a strong work ethic, and allowing that to kind of guide an impact on others in the workforce. But that's not something we just pick up, become equipped with as soon as we like move the tassel over. I you know, I'm an advocate of buying in as a student. I mean, of course, I'm a lifelong learner, you know, and I spent many years in school and figured out a way to stay in school. So I recognize I'm a little bit of an anomaly in that company, but you know, I think our student habits can be just as fruitful, and that's where we're laying the ground for those potential opportunities down the road. Let me queue up. I think we had another student drop some questions in here late, and I've got that ready to go. Here is Caleb.
Hello, my name is Caleb. I'm a senior at Mid-America Christian University. And my two questions for you today is, since COVID-19, what type of businesses would you go after to try and provide marketing service for to boost back their traffic?
Okay, so we've talked about the economic climate we're in, and things are very unstable. If you were in marketing right now or advising marketers, how would you advise them to boost their strategies getting back into a competitive market?
Right. I mean, I think my number one piece of advice is do not exploit this situation. You know, I don't watch a lot of local television, but you know, when there's storms on, I try to tune into the weather. And you know, I've seen so many commercials lately. You know, it's a advertisement for a truck. You know, we care about you. We're here for you. Come buy our truck. Or we love you. We know this is a hard time. Come buy a recliner. It's just like we have savvy consumers, and they see right through these gimmicks. So if you care, do something in your community that might even not benefit your own bottom line or your interests, to show that you truly care. Now, one of the difficult things and one of the tensions here is, you know, as Christians, we're not supposed to let our left hand know what our right hand is doing. We're not supposed to brag about the contributions and how holy we are and things. We're supposed to keep that really a secret. And so that creates a bit of a problem, you know, for a marketing agency. It's supposed to be essentially telling stories and bragging all the time about how great they are. But I think the key right now is authenticity. So I think we would have to hone in on authenticity, and that would be my advice to any company trying to do marketing right now.
Yeah, and certainly not overreach, right? I mean, I don't think it's a time, if you're a marketer, to add to the polarization that we're already going through. I know that is a savvy tactic for a lot of companies that have sort of enough financial support, right? They know their demographic, and maybe they're even using very polarizing texts, programs to advertise on, you know, to appeal to that distinct consumer. But it can be a game that backfires, right? Your company can take hits when you're trying to, when part of your message is alienation instead of maybe information.
Yeah.
All right, let me get Caleb's other question here.
And my second question is, do you think you learn more about marketing and content creation out of school or from self-teaching? Thank you.
Ooh, yeah.
No.
Of course, as a professor, I'm going to say you're going to learn a lot in school. You should stay in school, kids. So, yeah. So here's my answer to that. I think in school you're going to learn a lot of principles that will serve you in a general sense throughout your career. Now, if I go to work at Legacy Bank, for instance, I'm going to learn about how I market banking products. You know, and schools shouldn't be teaching that. There's no need for that level of specificity in an undergraduate education. And so I think a lot of times when people get out of school, they say, wow, I'm learning so much that I never learned in school. Well, a lot of that is you're learning the particularities of that particular industry and that particular culture that would be completely irrelevant if you went to work at another company. So sometimes I feel like students are like, this isn't practical. Well, we're trying to teach you life skills that are going to serve you in a lot of different capacities. So to answer his question, I think it's both. I think it's both.
I concur. It's a yin yang. And I've been relieved in recent years. I have seen a shift to some healthy optimism from students, but sometimes I've hinted at this before. It can depend on the curriculum, right? It can depend on who's investing in you, what that looks like. But I think we're getting close to the edge here. I have one more student to queue up for us. Tommy has a pair of questions I want to get to as we wrap up.
Okay.
Hello, Cory Fuller and Dr. Castleberry. My name is Tommy, and I am asking these two questions. The first one is, Cory, in this modern world, how do you share Christianity to the art museums? And my second question is, I've noticed that from your OBU bio, in your thesis, what do you mean by taking churches from symbols to branding? Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, let's merge these questions a little bit because I think they're getting at the same theme here. Tommy's broader early questionnaire, she had 2 or 3 questions that kind of followed a certain through line that I was really interested in, and it was, helping us understand the diversification of the art world. But I really like her pointed question about if you could talk more about church branding and what that research process was like for you, what you've discovered or maybe assisted with.
Right. So one just kind of clarification I would put on her question maybe, and this is just so I know what I'm answering. She used the idea of a museum. So most of my work has really been shown in galleries rather than museums. So museums are normally for dead people, dead artists, unless it's a contemporary museum of art. And so I seriously doubt any of my work will ever be in a museum. I'm okay with that. It's fine. I'll get over it. So, but there is a book that I might recommend to you. It's called God in the Gallery. And if you're interested in kind of like what would Christian abstract art look like, or how does faith work in a contemporary art world, that might be a good one to look at. And obviously the Western tradition is full of Christian themes in its subject matter. And so you cannot go to the Louvre or to the Met without seeing Christianity on display. And of course, it's oftentimes a kind of a westernized and kind of culturally appropriated version, depending on the artist's perspective. But the gospel, at any rate, is on display for the world to see. And so let me jump into my thesis, which you asked about, and Garrett's asking about. So I grew up as a Southern Baptist, son of a minister, and so I've always been around church, and I've also been interested in graphic design. And I needed to pick a thesis topic. And so that was kind of like, hey, this is perfect. The things I, kind of began to notice, Orthodox churches, Catholic churches had these very rich visual histories that they're still utilizing in their worship today. Baptist churches, a lot of evangelical churches, and some mainline churches tend to have an aversion towards imagery. So as a Southern Baptist, I grew up with Sunday school literature that would have paintings, of apostles and things, but that was really meant to teach, a particular Bible lesson, whereas, a Catholic or an Orthodox Christian would be using these icons as part of their worship. So I would begin to see like a real chasm. And I think contemporary believers are a bit lost. We don't all have a Christian background or Christian heritage now. And so I think churches like Life Church have sort of capitalized on this. And I don't mean to be negative, but sort of the church visual illiteracy of our present age. And so when you see what Life Church does, I mean, it's very modern, it's very contemporary. They're not using iconography necessarily. Their church facilities look a lot more like conference centers. Their sermons all have a theme to them. They have a great website. All their visuals are really strong. Everything seems to be branded, like even like they have a logo for baptism and everything. So it all seems like very corporate, but that's a visual language that speaks to our culture. And so I was examining all these different things. So early on in Christianity, you have the Cairo monogram, you have the ichthus, later you have the stauros, which is the cross, which is now the predominant symbol of Christianity. However, I argued in my thesis that the cross is essentially meaningless as a symbol. Now, the cross matters, right? To Christians, the cross matters. Don't take that out of context. But if you just see a cross on the side of a building, you don't know if it's Catholic or Protestant or Lutheran or Methodist or what it might be. Now, if it has a crucified Savior on the cross, it's probably Catholic. Baptists don't tend to put Jesus on the cross. So we serve a risen Savior, right? Am I right? Can I get an amen? Sorry, betraying my background there. So the cross isn't really a symbol of meaning because we have all these little splinters, sub-brands, if you will, of Christianity. And so Life Church uses their own like sort of proprietary mark. And a lot of churches are just sort of like lost in the mix. Like they're sort of holding on to their visual tradition and their liturgy, but they're kind of trying to rebrand, but it always just looks bad because they don't know what they're doing. And so it was just kind of examining like the whole landscape of how symbols have almost been displaced or replaced with modern day branding campaigns. And now we're seeing, and I did my thesis research like 10 years ago, but now we're seeing a real rise in a multi-campus church model that may at some point usurp traditional denominations. If Methodists continue to decline, if Baptists continue to decline, I don't even know if people talk about denominations anymore. Like I go to Life Church or I go to Frontline or I'm, part of this local parish or something. I don't even know if denominations are going to be relevant for the next generation. So I could talk about this topic all day, but that's probably enough for now. So
sure, no, absolutely. And for the sake of respecting your time and making sure everything is archived appropriately, I'll go ahead and kind of wind us down here. We've worked through all the questions submitted. In theory, there are more out there floating around that we just didn't get to in this timeline, but maybe an alternate Earth they were submitted on time, that sort of thing. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing.
Thank you for the questions. They were great.
Your experiences here, extremely valuable. Highly. Hey, do you have any projects, anything we should be on the lookout, or ways we can kind of, recognize your talent at work or appreciate, intellectual ideas, artistic ideas in progress?
I'm trying to survive the end of the semester, probably like a lot of people. So there's not a lot of creativity coming right now, but if you want to ever check out my website, it's Cory, Corey, LeeFuller.com, and I've got a lot of my work out there. And I'm also on Instagram at @cfuller, SEE Fuller. So.
Right. Awesome. Well, Cory, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming in and giving us a talk today, taking these questions. And for the rest of the class, we're just getting started, folks. We've got a nice array of talented and qualified people that are going to talk to us about various areas of expertise. So we'll continue to gain a diversification of learning. These are almost like simulated micro internships, but we're also developing our communication skills, written, oral and digital, all three. And that's something we can feel excited about improving in that area of professional development. And I'll be in touch with more information as the days and weeks continue to pass. All right. So thank you all for joining this interview session and creating social media presence and cultural movements.